Now, after a small red arrow in game week 29, taking us down to 16k, I'm hoping with the transfers and the plans that we've got lined up for this week, we can get back on track and secure another green arrow. So let's head into my team selection. Now, before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as we are now trying to hit 13,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and it is only possible with your amazing support. So let's take a look at how the team got on in game week 29. 52 points with, of course, a -4. We had all the big boys for potential captaincy: Haaland, Wood, and Bruno. We went with Chris Wood, and my argument behind this was trying to basically just cover off effective ownership. I thought if Chris Wood did anything, then obviously I would lose rank, whereas if the others did anything, I would at least gain rank. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. We didn't make enough points to kind of cover off, but we're still in a pretty decent position, only around a 3k red arrow. So we're now at 16k, still in a really, really good position, heading into the final 9 game weeks, technically, of the season, or 8 game weeks if you want to, count game week 30 in that. Yeah, you know what, we'll count it in that. So yeah, we're heading into this position in a really good place. And yeah, we got captaincy wrong. That's the only thing I think that let us down. We did have it on Bruno for large parts of the deadline stream. If we'd gone for it, we definitely would have been in kind of the top 10k. But I'm not kind of the biggest risk kind of taking manager. I'm more risk adverse, I'd say, with my picks. And I definitely think that's something that has hindered my game and also benefited my game for large parts this season. But in this case, it has definitely hindered it. But we move on. We keep the positive vibes rolling. Heading into, of course, this game week then, taking a look first at the betting odds and the projected goals and clean sheet numbers heading into game week 30. As you can see, really, really good numbers for Manchester City. Obviously, Erling Haaland going to be a very, very popular pick, you do imagine, for captaincy this game week. We're, of course, going to take a look at the debate between him and Mohamed Salah a little bit later, with, of course, Liverpool also having a pretty decent fixture on paper as well. We're also seeing good numbers across the board for a lot of teams: Ipswich, Palace, Chelsea, Newcastle. Brighton against Villa is also quite fancy for goals there. Same with Arsenal as well. They're also fancy to do a real good job on Fulham as well. So I think it could be quite a high scoring game week. We might see quite a few low kind of clean sheet odds for the other teams outside of probably Liverpool, Palace, City, and maybe Arsenal and Ipswich. Outside of that, I don't think we're going to get too many clean sheets, to be honest. As you can see, a lot of other games evenly matched. We could have quite high scoring one-sided games as well, with, of course, Liverpool, City, Bournemouth, and Crystal Palace as well. The Palace fixture, I was a little bit surprised, didn't have higher projected goal numbers, to be honest. 1.85 is kind of low. I was expecting a lot higher considering their performance at the weekend, and of course, how Crystal Palace have been performing recently and how dreadful Southampton are. I think, even the worst team in the league, probably Ipswich, could still manage to put 2 past this Southampton side, to be honest. So I was a little bit shocked with that, but of course, still pretty good numbers for Crystal Palace, and there's definitely some interesting options, as we're going to come on to see later in this video. First up then, I want to take a look at potential Chris Wood replacements. He did miss out on the FA Cup game yesterday, and Nuno's kind of comments suggested it is going to be a more serious long-term injury for Chris Wood, so we're probably not going to see him in people's teams again this season, with, of course, Forest not having a double game week planned for the remaining few weeks. Maybe 33 they might get one, with, of course, the FA Cup progression yesterday, but still it's probably going to be too soon for us to get Chris Wood back within our sides. Heading into then my top replacements, Haaland is going to be one purely down to the fact that City are probably going to have a double in 33. Of course, they've got that Leicester at home fixture, which makes him arguably one of the standout captains for this week. We saw with the betting data, top for predicted goals as well. His goal involvement numbers this season haven't been dreadful. The problem is it's just the double-digit hauls and, of course, his price tag. He's only managed to secure 3 double-digit hauls since game week 5, and when you are paying 14.8 million for him, and of course giving him the armband every single week when you're paying those big bucks, he's not really getting the value. And I think that's something that has kind of made Haaland a little bit kind of useless this season, because he's still had a pretty good year. It's just the fact that he's not really done it consistently with the big enough scores to justify the price point or the captaincy. Do I see that changing come the end of the season? Probably not. I would say game week 30, he offers himself up as a good captain, but of course Mohamed Salah is still there as a valuable option. But in game week 33, he probably will be the standout double game week captain if City were to double in that fixture. Of course, you've got Marmoush as the cheaper cheaper option. The only thing that was a little bit concerning with me is he's not actually played that many minutes, and his per 90 data kind of numbers are looking pretty poor. You imagine with a player getting 5 goal involvements in roughly 7 to 8 matches, his expected goal involvement numbers would be a lot higher because it would be kind of a little bit skewed. Now, potentially, we maybe just need to see a little bit more of him, and he might be one of those players like Son, Salah, kind of, you know, that just break the molds in terms of expected goal numbers. They're just that good. Such a clinical finisher that it doesn't really matter what stats they put up. But I definitely need to see more from him before I would take potentially a punt on him. Do I think he can cover off Haaland? Not for me, purely because a lot of people will be, of course, using captaincy on Haaland in game week 30 and potentially in 33 with a double. Visser is a player I would not recommend picking up, even if you're on a wild card in 31. The fixtures just aren't there. They're all pretty difficult. Newcastle, Chelsea and Arsenal. He's had a price increase, but yeah, not for me. I think Visser's time is up and I would not go near him. Mateta for me is going to be the number one replacement, isn't he? He is going to be the best replacement for Chris Wood heading into this game week. With, of course, Crystal Palace progressing past Fulham yesterday, it now means that they're going to blank in game week 34, meaning that they could double in 32 and 33. If you get that confirmed before the game week 30 deadline, that would be absolutely incredible. Then they face Southampton as well in game week 30. That could make him one of the most valuable picks within the game. I still think even if they don't get the double in 33, he would be one of my top replacements for Chris Wood. João Pedro and Evan Nielsen are your two cheaper options on this list. Evan Nielsen is very much a one-week punt if you wanted to go down that route, and of course take that Ipswich at home fixture. He's looked very, very good since coming back from injury, and his numbers this season haven't been too bad. João Pedro's actually kind of just been ticking along. 14 goal involvements, the same as Mateta in the Premier League season, but it seems like a lot of us have kind of lost faith in him, but he is a penalty taker. His minutes are really, really secure. The next two are difficult, but Leicester at home in 32, and of course a double on the horizon for Brighton in potentially 33 or beyond that as well could make him an interesting option, but I think he's probably towards the bottom end of this list with Visser as well. And then my final pick, of course, if you haven't got a wild card going in game week 31, is going to be Alexander Isak. They've got Brentford, one of the worst sides for XG conceded. Then they face Leicester in game week 31. They get the double in 32. Unfortunately, no double in 33, but Alexander Isak is one of those players that it speaks for itself, his numbers here. The predicted points as well over the next 3 are the highest on this list out of all the forwards. So I feel if you've not got that wild card ready for game week 31, I think Alexander Isak would be one of my top players I would be looking to go and get in within the side. In terms of my team, unfortunately, I can't afford Mateta for Wood, so we are going to have to make a few other adjustments and potentially look at other Crystal Palace players. And one of the ones that I have identified is going to be Sarr. The numbers that he's been putting up have been really, really decent. Of course, a good performance yesterday in the FA Cup for Crystal Palace, getting himself a goal as well there. Southampton, we know the fixtures, that potential double in 32 and 33. He could be a real big differential pick heading into this before we wildcard in game week 31 and kind of completely change our team. Of course, though, the only way I would be able to get this guy into my team is if I was to drop Bryan Mbeumo from my midfield. That is the only way that I would be able to get Sarr in. Now, I don't really like the idea of dropping Bryan Mbeumo. Yes, I think the fixture isn't amazing. 1.28 projected goals on the betting markets for Brentford this week. Not the best numbers, but I think taking a penalty taker out of a team that, you know, do perform and do score plenty of goals, that's a given. That's what Brentford do. I don't really like it for a player that, you know, will probably maybe see 70 to 80 minutes, but they are playing the worst team. It's kind of one of those, do I take the gamble of playing the worst team, or do I stick with Bryan, who is trusted? He's done me very, very well this season. I know he'll play 90 minutes. And the other thing that going with him as well potentially could offer is Newcastle obviously had their parade yesterday. You imagine some of the players were having a couple of beers and stuff like that. And it's an exhausting day out. You know, you're travelling on the bus, you're meeting people. Yeah, it's one of those where you're probably going to be a bit knackered today. And maybe training was a bit laissez-faire towards today. Or maybe they even had today off. Then they've got to go into a game at the in the week. You're just thinking maybe there might be, you know, something where Brentford can get something out of that, because the Newcastle players have had that high of the trophy celebrations, then getting themselves back into the Premier League football. Maybe they're just not going to be quite ready for it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me kind of spitballing ideas out here, but yeah, that is something that has crossed my mind. So I mean, I'm really struggling, to be honest, because I do like Sarr as an option. I definitely think if I had, more transfers in hand, or I could have got him in for Rodgers, I definitely would have done so. But now I am very, very hesitant on whether or not I want to make that move. But it is, like I said, that fixture is very, very tempting of Southampton, being the worst side in the league. But I think for now, I still think I'm probably going to stick with Brian and Mbeumo, build up my transfers, because of course we now can take them past the wild card. I think if this was last season, I definitely would have made the move. But I think with, of course, us having that ability to bank transfers past it, I think that could be the smarter play with, of course, more doubles and blanks further down the line. And I am going to need those transfers later on. In terms of then captaincy for this week, like I said, I think it is split between two players, Mohamed Salah and Erling Haaland. I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. The reason that I'm sort of leaning towards Haaland is because I don't think you're allowed to pay 14.8 million for a player and not captain him when he's at home against one of the worst sides for XG conceded. It's just not, you shouldn't be allowed to do it, and that's the only way you get value out of Haaland. Otherwise, for me, he is not a value pick. At 14.8 million, if he's not got the armband, if he's not delivering double-digit hauls, he is not a good pick. And you look at this Leicester fixture, you look at some of their recent results as well, and you do feel like they could get something out of that game, Manchester City, and you do feel like Haaland could be at the forefront of that. Obviously, his numbers in recent weeks, they've just been mediocre, and I think that's kind of summed up his season compared to the standards that he's set for himself, to be honest. It's been all right, 24 goal involvements, but nothing special. And in terms of those double-digit hauls I said, which is, of course, what we're looking for in terms of captain, only 3 past game week 5 is really, really low and really, really disappointing. So that, of course, does worry me. And then when we're going up against the juggernaut that is Mohamed Salah, who has been so consistent this year and absolutely exceptional, every single week decimating people's ranks where any time they go against him, I do think maybe I just go with Salah. You know what I mean? I just go with Salah. We hope that Haaland kind of has just below 100% effective ownership. We play that route because I do feel if Salah goes off, he's probably still going to be around 150, 160 EO, because a lot of people won't have the ability to either go and get Haaland or trust him with the armband. So I still think Mohamed Salah could just be one of those where we play the effective ownership, we play the safe way, we kind of just stick the captaincy on Salah, hope the rest of the team can be the kind of anchors to, of course, go and gain us our rank. Because if Salah goes off and we don't have him captain, that could probably be the end of our season and it could absolutely decimate our rank. But sometimes there is that argument that maybe you just have to gamble and maybe you have to trust a player like Haaland with a great fixture against Leicester and use this kind of period where he is a good option, a decent differential, and could gain us some really good rank. But all that keeps flashing in my mind at the moment is the people that, of course, went for Palmer a couple of weeks in a row, missed out on the Salah mega hauls, and it massively impacted them. The only thing that I think is kind of swaying me back towards Haaland at the moment is the form that Liverpool are showing. They've been really, really disappointing. The cup final was terrible. The Champions League game, terrible. Of course, losing Trent Alexander-Arnold, you're missing out on one of your most creative players. It does just seem like they're kind of just sort of trying to cross the line a little bit. Of course, there's contract situations with Trent, Salah, and Virgil van Dijk, and I do think that will have an impact on some players' performances as well. So I'm a little bit sceptical on whether I actually think, Liverpool could win this fixture. It is at home though, and Liverpool very, very rarely lose at home. So I do still think Salah probably is going to be the consensus pick for most, but I think I might take a gamble on Erling Haaland. Okay, let's waste no time. Let's dive into the team selection ahead of game week 30 then. Starting off first with our defenders and our goalkeeper. We're going to go with Pickford. I'm not going to waste a transfer on a goalkeeper. It's not the most ideal fixture. However, last season, this was one of the fixtures where he did score the most points out of all the games he played last season. And that's kind of a theme with Jordan Pickford, especially under Dyche as well. It's not really continued too much under Moyes, but when they have played top 6 sides, he usually picked up decent points. And I think he picked up around 36 last season from top 6 sides, which is absolutely ridiculous considering the points totals, where some people, of course, will rotate their goalkeepers in more difficult fixtures. But like I said, we're not going to waste a transfer on that one. We're just going to stick with Pickford. The back three is looking exceptional, to be honest. Ipswich, Southampton and Leicester. The bottom three, all 3 defenders. We've got Munoz, who will do some serious damage in terms of effective ownership if you haven't got him this week. Huijsen has been disappointing. Kirkes was, of course, the pick that we should have gone for, but We didn't have the budget, but yeah, definitely if I had to pick between the two right now, Kirkez would have been the one that I would have loved to have get my hands on. I think that is going to be the play for the remainder of this season and, of course, next season. It's getting those defenders that can, of course, get the attacking returns rather than the centre-backs, because those guys don't even need a clean sheet sometimes. Munoz, the amount of points I've picked up from him just picking up assists or goals, even when Palace have conceded, has been absolutely ridiculous. So I think that is going to be the play next season, because we've missed out probably on around maybe 9 or 10 points from Kirk's attacking returns since picking up Huijsen, which is a shame, but those 10 points could be, of course, the difference between us making the top 10k and potentially not making it as well. There were some murmurs around the international break that Gavardio had potentially picked up an injury. However, I've not heard any more kind of concrete information on that, so we'll have to wait and see till the deadline if we get any kind of further news. But we saw on the Rob T FPL betting data that City are really fancied for a clean sheet. On the bench, we've got Totti and Aina there if we need them in terms of our defenders. Let's head on then into the midfield. We're going to start off first with Morgan Rogers. I guess we could play Aina or we could play Totti here, but I think we're going to go with Morgan Rogers. I think that's probably going to be the sensible pick. Probably going to be one of the final few weeks that we actually get to use Morgan Rogers, because I do feel like if Villa do progress through the FA Cup, there's going to be a hell of a lot of fixtures coming up for them with, of course, Champions League progression, PSG in the next round for them for that one. That will be their big priority, and I think Rogers' minutes will, of course, be looking more towards that rather than the Premier League. And I think there's some more interesting picks to potentially have on the wildcard. Like I spoke about, Jared Bowen's a player that's really interesting me as a potential option as well. So yeah, there's some more interesting picks within those ones. Bryan Mbeumo, we did speak about him. I have stuck with him for now, but maybe on the deadline I potentially could switch to Saar. But I think this year, with of course us having the ability to roll our transfers post wildcard, I do think it makes more sense to play it a little bit cautiously, not chase the one game week punt despite the really good fixture. Maybe just stick with Mbeumo, take his any sort of attacking returns before, of course, we do shift him out on the wild card. He plays 90 minutes. That is definitely guaranteed as well. Didn't have a fixture at the weekend compared to Saar as well. And I think if Palace potentially go a couple goals up, we maybe could see Saar potentially come off with an early substitution if that was to be the case. Kluivert's in there with the Ipswich at home fixture. We saw on the Rob T FPL numbers really strong projected data for them. Happy to have him in the side. Bruno Fernandes, one of the most popular players in this game week. We, of course, got him for the 17-pointer against Leicester. He's been on a really good roll at the moment, picking up real great performances alongside some mega hauls. The only concern I do have is, of course, those were against pretty weak oppositions. Leicester, Real Sociedad, not really kind of mega powerhouses of Europe, are they, to be honest? But Nottingham Forest is going to pose a different test. But you do feel, of course, with Chris Wood out, that could potentially impact, Nottingham Forest's overall effectiveness as a side, and it might lead to potentially Bruno and Manchester United picking up a result there. Of course, they have been in better form in recent weeks, and Bruno is their main contributor to goals, penalties, free kicks. He does the lot. A lot of the goal involvements do come through him, or earlier in the season it was him and Ahmad. Now, of course, Ahmad out the picture. It is all through Bruno Fernandes. So if United do score, you do imagine Bruno is going to have some sort of goal involvement. Salah's there. Of course, we did discuss captaincy. We're sticking with our decision to go with Erling Haaland. If I bring up the strikers, as you can see here as well, we're sticking with the decision to go with Erling Haaland on the captaincy for now. That might potentially change in the deadline. I might get cold feet, back out of the gamble and go with the effective ownership route and play with Mohamed Salah. But I'm interested to see which way you guys are thinking down in the comment section below. If you've got Salah and, of course, Haaland this week, which way are you thinking in terms of captaincy? I've currently got it on Haaland, but like I said, I could be swayed to go for Mohamed Salah if I'm thinking that effective ownership is going to be ridiculously high. Of course, on the deadline stream, we'll do a poll. We'll see which way captaincy is going with that one. And if it's a landslide towards Mohamed Salah, I might just play it safe, go for the effective ownership route. Of course, we will be live on Tuesday afternoon, very early for large parts of the afternoon. Of course, if you do want to get your team reviewed by me or come and ask any questions about your team as well. I don't ideally like the fact that we've got the double up in terms of Brentford with Visser and Mbeumo, but these two have done me proud all season. It's going to be the last kind of game week with them, so hopefully one last dance between the two of them. They might be able to produce some magic against Newcastle, we never know, but it would be absolutely incredible if they could. Thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, if you did enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and good luck in Game Week 30.